This is a process and I'm sharing with you a thinking process. Diyan po tayo nagkakaroon ng edge over and above other people if we have a long-term horizon and we can adjust a little bit of our sights on certain things that can have a potential positive recovery better than others. Hello mga ka-RFF! This is again Rex Mendoza from Rampver Financials. Kamusta po kayo? I hope you're all doing well and thriving with family and loved ones. As always, we ask you to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and tap the notification bell. If you can share this with family, loved ones, and friends, we'll really appreciate it. But please do watch till the end because we have something special for you in this video. And who knows, that something special may benefit you or any of your loved ones. So let's start. This is going to be a very special video because gusto ko po sana mabigyan kayo ng glimpse on the entire process of what I go through in investing in a particular industry or sector and in a particular stock. Now, I want to actually start with certain caveats. Number one, I am not yet invested in the sector. I am not yet invested in any company I will be mentioning today. The reason why I want to be sharing this with you is because I'm in the early parts of my analysis. So I'd really want to share the whole process so that you get to know how I build up my conviction, as I've said, in a particular industry or sector or in a particular stock, which is something I'd really like all of you to go through. Kailangan po, inaaral natin, iniintindi natin ang mga investment na ating papasukan. Hindi porke may nasabi si Rex Mendoza or may nasabi ang ibang analysts or maaaring ibang naggagawa ng vlog or ng videos, ay tataya na kayo agad. It's very important that you go through the process rather than jumping into the stock selection. Kasi po, ang stock selection, pag pinikap mo na lang yan, ano ibig sabihin? Maghahanap ka na lang ng chismis, maghahanap ka na lang ng sabi-sabi. Pero ang importante yung proseso. Because if you go through the certain process, if you go through the analysis, your action, your approach is replicable. Pwede po nating ulitin. And if it's going to be successful, then we're supposed to refine and further improve the way we deal with our studies and evaluations. Alam nyo naman po kami sa Rampver Financials, inuuna namin dapat lagi the basics, the strategy, the foundation. Dapat po, ang lahat ng ito, ang cornerstone, strategic investing. And there are three things about strategic investing that we'd want to stress. Number one, goals focus dapat siya. So, para saan ito? Ako, I'm thinking it should be part of a portfolio that I should be keeping in the next 3 to 5 years. Hindi ito yung tinatawag na chupita that pag umakyat ito, lalabas agad ako. That's for my trading portfolio. Ito, iniisip ko, is for an opportunity that might be there today, that can be there in the next 3 to 5 years. It can pay me handsomely if my analysis is correct. Number two, hindi ko naman po tatayaan ng todo-todo na isang larga lahat yan. No, it has to be continuous and consistent. Habang ngayon mura pa, walang masyadong pumapansin, lagyan natin ng konti. Tapos, pag medyo, minsan bumababa, maglagay pa rin tayo. And when the strategy starts paying dividends, ibig sabihin, medyo tama yung choice, umaakyat. Hindi ibig sabihin, I will be taking the profits. Kailangan may konting discipline. Na-hit na ba yung goal? Ano ba talaga yung target? Yan. Kailangan continuous and consistent. And lastly, forged with discipline. Kailangan po, meron tayong tinatawag na accountability and responsibility. We are on top of our investment portfolio and we direct and navigate our own investment journeys. Kaya kailangan po, responsable tayo. Hindi porke kumita ka ng ganyan, okay, kukunin mo na agad, gagastahin mo na yung pera. Hindi eh. Pang-invest ito, long-term ito. So, ibig sabihin, kung tatanggalin mo man yan dyan, ang tanong ganito, saan mo yan ilalagay? May paglilipatan ka bang another long-term investment that can pay off handsomely? Kasi kung wala, abay, mas mabuti pa, tenga mo na lang yan dyan at baka ang prospects niyan mas mataas because inaral mo ng tama, hindi ba? So, kailangan po yung strategic investing ang cornerstone. Now, the next thing that's very important is to put this decision on top of other decisions. Kailangan po nauna yung tinatawag na asset selection. Hindi po tayo basta lalarga ng investment sa isang stock tapos before you know it, 50%, 60% ng pera mo nakalagay na dyan. Will you really put so much at stake in a single position? Or hindi ba dapat mas maganda, diversified ka? At we're not talking about diversification only in stocks. We are talking about diversification in other asset classes. Magkano ang nasa real estate? Magkano ang nasa mutual funds? Magkano ang nasa insurance? Magkano ang nasa negosyo? So, pag ginawa mo yung asset allocation na ganun, merong mapupuntang allocation sa stocks. Yang mapupunta sa stocks, anong part dyan ang kailangan mong ilagay sa pipiliin mong particular company or negosyo na tatayaan mo. Again, lahat po ito nanggagaling sa isang sound strategy that we utilize and we stick with no matter if the short term doesn't seem like it's working. Kasi growth is always an issue. There has to be a balancing act between growth and risk. Hindi naman po ibig sabihin na may pandemya, hindi na importante ang ating goals. Hindi ba? Dahil your objective has to be achieved regardless of the situation. Nag-set forth kayo ng retirement, nag-set forth kayo ng children's education. Dahil may pandemya, hindi nyo na dapat matupad yung objectives na yon. Hindi po excuse eh. We have to be able to achieve our objectives no matter what. So dapat yung balancing act between growth and risk, i-manage natin yan. Now, it's also important to say that a change in perspective actually changes many things. Ang tingin natin sa investment horizon, for example, pag medyo mahaba-haba, mag-iiba ang ating pananaw sa ating investment. Kasi ngayon, maaring takot ka. May pandemya eh. Pero oras na tumingin ka ng mas malayo, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, di ba dapat nag-iiba yung perspective mo? Perspectives always change with investment horizons, and that's the reason why it's going to be all a matter of discipline and strategy. Alam na po nating lahat na COVID-19 pandemic has led all asset classes, all investment classes to take a plunge and actually contract in terms of value. Akala natin, medyo palabas na tayo sa pandemya, biglang ayan na, pumasok na naman si Delta variant. And nagkakaroon ng konting issues ngayon with strict lockdowns na pabalik-balik. Di ba? Akala natin tapos na yan last year. Last March, we got down to an ECQ. Etong August lang po, may bago na naman tayong ECQ. Now, lumuluwag na naman ng konti, GCQ na naman daw. So, itong lahat ng ito shouldn't put us in a situation where pabago-bago din tayo ng strategy. That happens for your trading portfolio. But for your core portfolio, you have to look beyond the pandemic already. Kasi, alam nyo, yung from time to time napapasok ng mga inputs, yung last July lang, di ba? Ano yung nangyari nun? May MCIA rebalancing. Nabigyan tayo ng bad mark ni Fitch rating. Sinabi, from ang outlook natin na stable, ginawang negative. Hindi naman binaba ang ating risk rating, pero may warning. So nakakatakot yun. Sabayan mo ng Delta variant, syempre po, nagkaroon ng negative sentiment. Isipin nyo na lang, kung kayo'y kinabahan, binenta nyo lahat. Ano nangyari? Di ba? Kung kailan ghost month ang August, bumawi. So, dapat, nagkamali tayo ng decision doon. So, very important na ang ating long-term strategy is for our long-term goals, it's for a long-term investment horizon, and it has to be characterized, evaluated, and studied in the same format. Hindi po pwedeng pang-trading. If we're going to be looking at the projections by the ADB, medyo binaba po yung ating outlook. Dati, sabi nila, 2021 recovery, 6.5. 2022, 6.5. Ngayon po, ang sabi ng ADB, recovery for 2021 because of what's happening, ibababa natin sa 4.5. Tapos yung 2022, 5.5. Yung 2023, yun ang iaakyat natin to 7 to 7.5. So what am I telling you? Siyempre po, all of these developments push our recovery a little further. But the numbers aren't exactly that bad. Yung growth po na 4.5, hindi naman lahat ng bansa sa mundo mag-grow ng 4.5 So maganda po rin yan. The other factor that I'd really like you to look at is hindi naman nawawala yung growth Lumilipat sa susunod na taon. Ibig sabihin, they still expect the recovery to happen. Meron lang pong konting delay in the way that it will happen. So, nagiging reaction ng market, volatility. Nagkakaroon ng uncertainty, and since things are uncertain and ambiguous, what happens? Akyat baba, akyat baba. Plunge ng almost 50%, umakyat ng 53%, bumaba ng 15%, umakyat uli ng 12%, bumaba uli ng 10%. Ganyan po ang nagiging reaction ng merkado. But on the interest rate, nag-steepen na po yung curve para ang mga negosyante makakita ng oportunidad to expand, to increase their level of business, to hire more people. Sabayan nyo pa nung bago nilang pinasok na create, medyo may pag-asa po uling makarecover ang ating mga negosyante. So, I will be using that as a jump-off point in this idea that, as a country, hindi naman nagbago yung ating mga tinatawag na fundamental strengths Nandiyan pa din yung fundamental strengths. Now, pag-usapan na natin, syempre may konting bangayan sa politika, I will set that aside. Kasi election year po next year, tatanggapin natin yan. Talaga namang given yan But, you and I know, elections always have a positive impact on the Philippine economy, which is technically something that we have seen in the 4 or 5 elections regardless kung sinong nanalo. Pero, tunan po natin ng pansin itong tinatawag na fundamental strengths. Andyan pa rin ang demographic variable. We have a big base of population, very young compared to other older countries, which makes us a very strong domestic economy. As countries close down, we have the chance to grow, to survive because we have a good local domestic market. Our remittances growth, still growing. After a challenge last year, bumaba ng less than 1%. Ang expectation nga po, bumaba dapat ng over 20%. Less than 1% ang binaba. Tapos ngayon, up na siya ng 6%. And kahit po maliit, gusto kong sabihin, lamang na siya sa 2019, which are pre-pandemic levels. Tapos yung IT BPO industry, napaka-resilient po. From, again, a challenging position in 2020, may growth na siya ngayong 2021. So we're talking about two pillars that remain to be resilient against one pillar which continues to be weak, which is tourism. Pero hindi ko po masyadong i-discount yung tourism kasi ang Pilipinas, fundamentally, not too dependent on international tourism. Unlike Thailand, unlike other countries, ang Pilipinas po, ang number 1 turista sa Pilipinas, Pilipino. So, pag tayo po nag-umpisang magbukas locally, may pag-asa na po yung ating tourism, better probably than countries like Thailand that are so dependent on international tourists. Ang ating banking system continue to be strong. I mentioned it earlier, create, and the FIST law, yung tinatawag na Financial Institution Strategic Transfer Act. Ito pong mga ganitong batas, in the past, ginagawa din niya ng mga kongreso, but a tad late. Ngayon po napakaganda, within the pandemic, na ipasa na nila yung laws, may pag-asa pong makatulong talaga sa ating mga enterprises and corporations. We still have a very, very strong level of gross international reserves that keep the exchange rate well even during this crisis. Abay, sa ibang crisis po, yan ang medyo sumisipa, exchange rate. Ngayon, very stable. And we have a very strong government stimulus package. Yung build plus po na yan, napakaganda niyan. So, what's the driver of market movements? Abay, COVID infections pa rin po ang nagdadala. Pag umakyat ang infection, tapos nagstricto tayo with the quarantine protocol, bumababa ang market. Pag lumuwag-luwag ng konti, aakyat na naman yung market. So, yung volatility po, dala talaga ng infection. And why is that? It's because of mobility. Ang economic growth po, depende at sigun sa mobility ng tao Dito po makikita nyo yung mobility nung end 2020 maganda na sana. Almost 70% compared to pre-pandemic. Pero nagkaroon tayo ng ECQ nung March kaya bumagsak siya. But from March to July, abay umakyat na po uli ang mobility. Maganda na sana. Pero pag tama ng August with this new ECQ, syempre bumaba na naman ang mobility, syempre bababa na naman ang markets. So, again, ang aking pong thesis dito is that this will always now be a function of the variants, Delta variant, Lambda variant, whatever variants coronavirus can dish out versus the vaccinations. No matter what you say, ang nangyayari po kasi dito minsan yung mga sikat na vaccinated, di ba? Na-highlight, nagkasakit uli. But if you're going to be looking at the numbers, they're very, very little. So ang labanan talaga, vaccinations. And that's the reason why you see countries like Singapore, you see countries like Israel, UAE. Abay, nandun na po sila sa third dose So ano ibig sabihin? Kahit sabihin na nating may nahahawa pa rin na vaccinated. Number one, mild na lang, minsan asymptomatic pa. At kung na-hospital man, kaya ng kanilang hospital system. Ang problema ng Pilipinas, mababa ang ating vaccination rate. Nagka-problema tayo sa supply nung bandang umpisa. So, hindi kinakaya ng ating mga ospital. But can you just imagine, if our vaccination rate accelerates like it's happening now, things will actually change. Dito nyo na makikita, yan ang sinisilip kong potential crossover. And that's why I always pride myself in thinking I should have a step ahead on the market. Hihintayin ko ba yung crossover na yun na mangyari? Nakikita na natin ngayon nakakapag 700 jabs na tayo a day. Because we now have the vaccines on shore. So if you're going to be looking at the rate we're vaccinating, by the end of the year, I'm sure the NCR at the very least and Metro Cebu or Metro Davao will be better than the last quarter of 2020. Kasi ilan ba ang vaccinated noon? Halos wala. Kung by the end of the year, minimum may 30 million na tayong vaccinated kasi mga nasa 20 million na tayo ngayon di ba sana mag-iiba ang experience natin for the last quarter. So ngayon, ang sinisilip ko, kung mangyayari na yang a little turning point, sisilipin ko itong K-shape recovery. Ano ba nangyari sa K-shape recovery, di ba? Nauna na yung technology, essential retail, software services, telco, yan ang mga unang umakyat. Kaya yan K-shape nawala yung V, L, U. Ngayon, K-shape. Kasi may naiwan. Ano yung naiwan? Hospitality, travel, entertainment, construction. Yan ang mga bumaba. So, ano dyan ang mga mauuna sa recovery? Yun ang dapat tinatanong natin sa sarili natin to be ahead of the curve. Again, ang usapan po natin, hindi ba? This is a process and I'm sharing with you a thinking process. Diyan po tayo nagkakaroon ng edge over and above other people if we have a long-term horizon and we can adjust a little bit of our sights on certain things that can have a potential positive recovery better than others. Kasi iniisip ko di ba? Infrastructure will be crucial in a post-pandemic recovery. The Philippines does not have the necessary infrastructure. Yung build na yan is focused on this. And let's face it, Travel, tourism, hospitality, susunod naman yan eh. Transportation, that will eventually recover. Pero kahit papano, bago mag-recover, ang tanong, nakaposisyon ka ba? Nauuna ka na ba? Itong Oxford Business Group, sinabi yan eh, the Philippine Infrastructure Agenda offers great opportunities. Tapos alam naman natin, ano ba yung pinupush ng gobyerno? Di ba? Build, build, build eh. What is going to be there in the next 5 years? And mind you, it's an election year next year. Di ba? Every time magkaka-election year, itong mga infrastructure projects, dapat yan i-bid out at gawin na kaagad. Kasi pagdating ng eleksyon, pagtayo sa entablado ng isang kandidato, ano ba nagawa mo? Ano naibigay mo? Ito yung pinagpapayabangan kahit tapos o hindi, basta naumpisahan, that's a good mark. So kailangan silipin natin yan. Itong railways, urban mass transport, airports and seaports, bridges and roads, and ultimately, better cities, better urban centers. Which leads me to think, sino ngayon ang magbe-benefit dito? Di ba yung construction at infrastructure sector? These are the companies that are involved in building structures, roads, houses, offices, condos, entertainment centers, and the like. Sila yung susunod na pwedeng makarecover. Kasi ngayon, hinto lahat eh. But as people now get to be more hopeful, people now get to be more optimistic, makikita mo, teka lang, part of construction hindi huminto. You know why? They are considered essential eh. Kaya tumutuloy kasi nakikita nyo, di ba, nade-deliver. I'm sure nakadaan na kayo sa stage 3 connector ng Skyway. Nakadaan na kayo sa BGC Ortigas Link. Marami pa pong kasunod yan. Magagandang airport. Di ba? Railways that can be connecting Malolos and Clark. Yan ang mga aabangan natin. This is the cornerstone of the Philippine economy. Moving into an election year with the pandemic simmering down. Silipin natin, ano ba yung dinadagdag nitong construction and infrastructure sector? Tandaan po natin ito ha. The sector has been a main contributor to Philippine economic growth with construction gross fixed capital formation accounting for nearly 3 trillion. In real terms po ito ha, 3 trillion. 1.8 percentage points of the 6.6 average GDP growth in the past 4 years before the pandemic. Ganun pong kalaki ang impact niya. And why is this so? And I will tell you, the reason why governments always look at the construction sector as a thing they can control and push better at a time like this. 1 year before the election and within a pandemic. Bakit? Because the construction sector almost always will have a multiplier effect. And this multiplier effect will impact, number 1, direct benefits like job production. Siyempre, because construction yan, labor-intensive yan. Maraming taong nagkakaroon ng trabaho, maraming taong nagkakaroon ng pera, and because of that, it trickles down into the economy. Number 2, ripple effect of market activity. Kasi for example, even sa isang probinsya, naglatag ng semento for a certain road. At diba yung gastos doon, yung hinire ng mga taong taga doon, nagkakaroon sila ng pera, nagkakaroon ng market activity. Diba? Nagkakaroon ng mga binebenta sa palengke, nagkakaroon ng mga karagdagang kalakal because nagkapera at nagkaroon ng economic power yung mga taong nandun. And because of what they are and what they do, they contribute mobility. It allows mobility, roads, bridges, rail. Mobility that's higher will foster new, that's number 4, new business opportunities. So, malaking bagay po talaga itong construction. And while other businesses, other sectors like food, essential retail, technology, medyo nauna na nga, ano ba yung pwedeng humabol? At a time like this, when the alignment is there. Ano ang pwedeng humabol? It's construction. The resilience and recovery of this sector is inevitable. The construction industry is expected to bounce back in 2021 and grow at an average rate of 8.3% from 2021 to 2024, taking up output value equal to $75 billion. In fact, ito, napakaganda po nito ha. Babasahin ko to. Global data expects the Philippine construction industry to a record growth of 22% in 2021. Output that is surpassing the pre-pandemic levels by 2023. So in 2022, the industry is projected to register 15% and expand by an average rate of what I mentioned earlier for the remainder of the forecast from 2023 to 2025. So, hindi po haka-haka itong lahat. Based on an analysis, based on all of these researches, no? Some of it, primary research ko po. Some of it, syempre, humihingi tayo ng tulong sa ating mga kaibigan. Abay, nakatulong po sa akin dito yung aking close friend na si Edward Lee from Call Financials. They did a study on the construction industry. They did a study on certain companies. ATR Asset Management also helped me, and Abacus Securities Corporation. So, lahat po ito, hindi pwedeng hugot sa buwan o tinatawag na pakiramdam. You really have to look at your industry, sectoral, and company performance. So, when it comes to that question, is it time to include construction in your investment portfolio? Parang pwede. At talagang pwede na. Ano bang pagpipilian natin? There are a number of construction and infrastructure companies that are listed in the stock exchange. Maybe not all good construction companies are here, but there are good options from those listed companies. Kasi masasabi ko lang po, syempre, favorite natin, MDC. Makati Development Corporation. Pero yan, wholly owned ng Ayala Land. So, pag nakataya ka sa Ayala Land, parang kasali ka na din doon sa MDC. Pero, what if you'd want a pure play? Yung walang tinatawag na residential development, walang tinatawag na other business lines at property development or real estate development as a whole. Yung talagang construction ka lang and infrastructure. Then you will have this particular stocks and companies to choose from, which made me zero in on one based on what I realized and what I gathered from a lot of research reports. Abe, pinili ko po, nag-zero in ako sa Megawide. Engineering a First World Philippines. You know, Megawide is one of the leading engineering and infrastructure firms in the Philippines today, with a decisive portfolio in engineering, procurement, construction, and transport-oriented development. And when we say transport-oriented, it can be airport and it can be landport. Ayan, tatlo po ang kanilang negosyo, engineering, procurement, and construction, within which they have urban deca projects, meron silang high-end na mga building like Proscenium, meron silang mga opisina like Arthalan Tower, McKinley West, City of Dreams, which is a mixed-use entertainment, and the Double Dragon Plaza, which is partially commercial and partially office. In airport infrastructure, they were the ones who developed the Mactan-Cebu Airport, and they're the ones operating it today. Pero yung Clark, sila rin ang gumawa, pero tinurn over nila sa gobyerno. So, they also have a transport-oriented development, which is the biggest bus terminal in the Philippines, yung Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange or PITX. And they're also involved right now in the carbon market development. So, zero in na po tayo agad sa financials. No fundamental analysis will be complete without an analysis of the figures reported by the company. Alam niyo po as a matter of pride, these are going to be very recent numbers. Kasi po, every company reports to the SEC, every company reports to the PSE. pag sila po ay listed companies. But there are times when they recast their figures after the quarterly reporting. So ito pong ipapakita ko sa inyo weren't even captured in some of the analyst reports that happened after the reports were made on the second quarter. So again, fresh from the oven po, ika nga. If we're going to be looking at the generated net income of Megawide for the second quarter of 2021, it was a major turnaround. 135 million net income from a loss of 491 million in the same second quarter of 2020. Dahil alam nyo naman, last year, dun talaga pinakamabigat yung lockdown. After March, syempre po, ang pinakatinamaan was the second quarter of 2020. Pero mukhang mas totoo itong turnaround na ito. Kasi definitely in the first quarter of 2021, meron ng recovery na 3 million eh. Kumita na si Megawide ng 3 million. But in analyzing the figures, alam niyo po, that was largely brought about by the benefits of the CREATE law, yung pagbaba ng mga taxes. Ito pong second quarter is very different because it actually came from operations. So for the first half of 2021, the total net income was 138 million, a turnaround from a loss of 290 million in 2020 for that same period. Revenues for second quarter 2021 reached 3.86 billion or 166% higher than the same period second quarter of 2020. And this is already higher by 3.7% compared to the first quarter of 2021. So if you're going to be looking at first half revenues in total, it was up 18% at 7.6 billion. Pero ang gross margin po, naahita ng konti. It was lower at 17% from the 22% that Megawide was having before the pandemic. Let's face it, they're in construction. Alam nyo naman po, may additional na gastos ngayon ang pag-operate dahil nga we have to follow certain quarantine protocols, and as mentioned, siguro kinupkup nila yung mga tao nila in those construction sites, and that will account for some higher level of expenses compared to the pre-pandemic period. So anything booked before the pandemic will certainly have higher margins. Now let's move a little more granular. If we're going to be looking at per business line, construction po actually lorded it over the performance of the other two lines of business of the company. Construction revenues in second quarter of 2021 was up 235%, higher than the second quarter of 2020 at 3.6 billion. So yung total first half 2021 revenues of construction was up 44% to 7 billion. So suma total po ang nagbuhat ng overall performance at turnaround ni Megawide is its construction business, the heart and soul of the company. Airport operations revenues was down 73% for the first half of 2021. Siguro naman po, talaga namang mahihirapan sila because there's no travel, countries are on a lockdown. So sa international side, may tama tayo dyan. But even locally, because of the announced ECQs, MECQs, malaki po ang impact niyan in terms of airport revenues. The other line of business was landport. Ito pong landport revenues was at 360 million, down 40% compared to 2020 levels. Pero ito po ang sinasabi ko, we have to get into a stretch of this analysis kasi po kailangan makita natin beyond the accounting adjustments. Meron pong tinatawag na PFRS adjustments for which nag-benefit yung kanilang 2020 leasing revenues. If recasted without PFRS adjustments, ang kanilang first half of 2020, 257 million lang in terms of pure leasing revenues. If we compare this to 360 million pure leasing revenues for the same period of the first half of 2021, up na po ng 40%. But I'm not saying it's over the hump. It's very clear here. If we're going to be digging down into this analysis, construction is carrying the load and it's doing it majestically. Covered po ang losses nitong dalawang other operations. But moving forward, we know that this will be bound to recover. It's just that if you're going to be looking at it now, we haven't really seen the light at the end of the tunnel for the pandemic. Pero maganda na po yung takbo ng overall business kasi the construction is kind of covering up for the two other lines. But when we see the two other lines recover, can you just imagine what it all means for the overall financial picture of Megawide? So what do we now do? What's the overarching analysis that we can use to push this forward? Ibabalik ko po yung shinare ko sa inyo many times and in many videos. Yung 4 P's in evaluating an investment proposition. If you will remember, this came from a good friend and mentor, Mr. Edward Lee. Ano ba ho yung 4 P's na yon? Number 1, people and leadership. Number 2, products and brand. Number 3, potential of the business. And number 4, predictability. So if we're going to be looking at all those 4, can we move ahead with an investment in a company like Megawide? So makikita nyo, people, mukhang magaling ang management team. I think many people consider the chairman and CEO, Engineer Saavedra, as one of the best in this particular sector and industry. And he has a good team. And I can tell you, I even know some of the people in that board. Sometimes I can just pick up the phone to ask them certain questions about the business. Where it's headed, what's the optimism that prevails within the organization. In fact, I consider that a very solid team. So, check, number 1. Number 2, product and brand. Napakaganda na po ng nagawa nila in many aspects. In fact, I will be going through each of that in their 3 lines of businesses kung paano nila na forward ang kanilang leadership in these products that they're part of and in their brand, which is now one of the most respected in the industry. Number 3, potential. Ayan, iisa-isahin natin yung potential ng construction, ng airport operation, and landport operations. Then, we're going to be looking at other lines of business that they are getting into and somehow beginning to be good at. At yan po ay isa sa mga future strengths na maaaring ibigay ng Megawide sa kanilang investors. So, let's look at the potential in construction. Alam nyo, not a lot of people realize it. But even in an ECQ, essential construction is allowed. And that's the reason why ang laki po nung revenue ni Megawide sa construction eh. Although nag-contract talaga ang airport at landport operations, yung construction talagang tumuloy-tuloy. All they needed to do was create barracks for their people para naman maproteksyonan, hindi mahawa ng COVID. Parang kumbaga sa they created these construction bubbles. And that's why they have been able to deliver on their construction commitments. 63 billion po ang order book ni Megawide. Part of that is the package 1 of the Malolos-Clark Railway Project. Pero ang totoo, may ibibid pa na mga projects between now and the end of the year. And as I told you, this have to be awarded before the elections. Kasi pagdating po ng Disyembre, pagdating ng early months of next year, hindi na pwedeng i-award yan. Magsasara na yung window na yan. So definitely, this will be up for grabs by the end of the year or before the end of the year. Yung subway system, yung North-South Commuter Rail South Line. So if you're going to look at it, that's an added 50 billion potential. Hindi ko naman sinasabing mapapanalunan ni Megawide lahat yan, but it can take pieces of those na makakadagdag sa kanyang book. So they will now have to deliver on this book of orders so that they can actually recognize the revenues. And on top of all that, ano ba po yung potential nitong product/brand na tinatawag natin kay Megawide on the construction arena? It's first world construction technology on residential, office, commercial, leisure, mixed-use projects, construction supply, and solutions like precast, formworks, cement batching equipment, transportation, and logistics. Think about it. Lamang na lamang sila doon. Pero naiiwan yung airport at landport. Think about the airport. Look at how they have delivered the Cebu Mactan Airport. Abe, nakikita nyo naman, yan ang background ko dito. Hindi po yan architect's perspective. Yan na talaga ang airport. I was one of the lucky ones who saw this being constructed. Siyempre po, may konting tinatawag na inconvenience when they were doing it, but little by little as they passed on certain sections to full operating mode. Abe, napakaganda po talaga, no? Sayang lang talagang napasukan ng pandemic. Pero just think about it. It's not just a great, clean, and architectural marvel. It has won awards, yes, I will admit. Pero iba po yung tinatawag nating operational metrics. Dati, in 2014, 6.5 million passengers lang ang kaya ng terminal na ito. Ngayon, 13 million na. Dati, they service 11 airlines. Ngayon, 26 airlines na. Isipin nyo na lang kung hindi nagka-pandemic. But on top of that, isipin nyo when we get back to normal. Alam nyo, a lot of people are saying, Rex, travel will change eh. Baka wala na tayong chances of getting back to the old normal. Alam nyo, when I hear these things, I always look back at my very own experience. Narinig ko na po yan, yung 9/11, nangyari yung World Trade Center bombing. Lahat po, chinecheck ng mga gamit, lahat. Parang travel has never been the same. And people said, you know, it's too much trouble. This is the end of travel. Ano po nangyari? Di ba? Nagkaroon pa ho tayo ng tinatawag na record levels of travel as it became more convenient, as it became more cost-effective, at nagmura. Kaya po, ang swerte ng mga millennials, ang mga bata ngayon, nakakabiyahe ng maaga. Hindi kagaya nung panahon natin na, you know, it could have cost a fortune to travel and vacation in places like Japan or Europe. Ngayon, kayang-kaya na ng lahat. So, I have a great expectation and some level of optimism that tourism will eventually be back. It's a matter of time. How about PITX? How about the landport? Ayan, challenge din po yan dahil, syempre, before the ECQ, umaakyat na po sana ng 46,000 to 50,000 per day ang foot traffic ng PITX. The biggest transport terminal, bus terminal in the Philippines. Isipin nyo, araw-araw, may pandemic pa ha, 46 to 50,000. Nung nagkaroon ng ECQ, bumaba to 26,000. Can you imagine? Once the vaccinations happen, once we get to herd immunity, ano po kaya ang magiging foot traffic niyan? Remember, this is not just a terminal. It is a commercial area. It is offices. So, ang potential niyan, medyo malaki. So, we're now looking at two businesses that are challenged but can have a rosy future. We have a great base in construction, a huge portion of today's revenue which can contribute such a big income in the next 2 to 3 years, while the two other legs are kind of weak. Pero what about a little more into the future? Alam nyo, may products si Megawide with their precast, with their formworks. Eventually, I would tend to think they can partner with a developer or they can actually start their own development projects in that particular segment where their technology will be very useful. So makikita nyo, sa residential, may potential yan. The other side to it that they haven't been talking too much about is clean energy. They also have involvement in clean energy and they're getting their foray into solar. In fact, ang balita nga po, di ba, maglo-launch sila ng REIT for energy production that is renewable. It's kind of different. Pero ito po yung mga potential in the future. So, all told, if you're going to be putting this all together, meron talagang pag-asang malaki si Megawide to be part of a robust portfolio. So, all I'm telling you is this. I'm not saying it's a great chance, get in, jump in. Hindi po ganun. So, on top of this qualitative and quantitative analysis, which is fundamental, I also viewed the technical analysis part. At doon ko nakita, medyo challenge pala talaga if you're going to be looking at certain metrics while the potential is really good as of the moment, hindi pa nagko-cross yung mga moving averages na dapat, medyo bearish pa rin ang kanyang signal. So what am I saying? Kailangan ba purely technical at hindi na ako gagalaw? I don't do that. As I've said, I'm a little ahead. So anong ibig sabihin? Maaring mag-invest ako pero hindi ko ito todo. Like let's say, if I have an amount which I earmark for an investment like this, instead of putting in 100%, 10% na muna. Uunti-untiin ko yan as I see the price moving from 606 to 616. Ngayon, bumaba na naman sa 610. Habang ganyan pa ang movement, mag-accumulate ako ng pakonti-konti para meron kang bala when there are market movements that will go to your favor. Remember, the current price is 22% below fair market estimate. Yung fair market estimate kasi 751 eh. Eh yung presyo niya 616. So if you're going to look at it, that's 22% potential gain without the prospects of post-pandemic business. Pero ito po yung basis ko din. Isa pang napaka-eye-popping realization. Yung presyo na 616 is actually 64% kasi tumama po yan ng 17 pesos eh. Isipin nyo, 616 lang. 17 yan pre-pandemic. So, post-pandemic, if the market becomes confident, if things go well, and people go into optimal mode, baka pwede pong tamaan uli yung 17, which is 64% higher. So, again, uulitin ko po, no? Hindi po ito recommendation. I ask you to study further. Pinakita ko lang po sa inyo yung proseso ko so that you get to see how I get to evaluate. As I've said, it was my chance to let you have a glimpse of the way I do things, which is something that can help you in doing your own. All the analysis that we've gone through actually zeroes in on one basic conclusion, that this company, Megawide, has actually moved and metamorphosized purely engineering and construction company to a real premier infrastructure innovator in our country. So if you are open to take a position of risk, a stock like Megawide might be something to consider. But wait, there's more. There might be some of you who might be a bit concerned about the state of affairs of the stock market, the ups and downs and the volatility because of the uncertainty. And you might say, Rex, talagang, sorry hindi ko muna kaya. Talagang maghihintay ako. There is another option because Megawide, with all of this performance, doesn't exactly just offer an investment proposition on the equity side. Very soon, Megawide will be launching its offering of its preferred shares, Series 4. This might be a good chance for us to also earn on almost a fixed income basis. It's going to be an opportunity to somehow get higher level yields because of our exposure to the company, but not riding the ups and downs of the stock market if that's not going to be a comfortable proposition for you. Again, Ramper Financials is here to help you navigate, to help you make sure that you also go through the right processes and analysis in studying your future investment propositions. Sabi ko po kanina, there is a different thing about this video, and this is it. On top of asking you to like this video and subscribe to our channel, I'm gonna ask you to subscribe and comment. Doon sa mga subscribers na po, mag-comment lang kayo sa video ito. May natutunan ba kayo? Or may gusto ba kayong idagdag na maaring hindi ko na-consider? Para naman maging two-way ang ating aral. Matutunan ko din from you and your own perspectives. But, bakit ko po sinabing mag-comment kayo? Kasi magra-raffle po kami ng 5 MaxiCare e-ready cards. 5 po ang ira-raffle namin, and you can use this for a one-time emergency that can probably happen to you or to your loved one. Transferable po ito. And we do hope you engage and let us know the way you feel, what you have learned. And as I've said, kung may na-miss po ako na maaring makakontribute kayo, let's also hear it out para naman po natuto din ako from you. Again, this is Rex Mendoza from Ramper Financials, hoping that this video was helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you again in our future videos. Blessings always.